In this video, I'll be presenting sentences that are only in the present subjunctive. In my two previous videos, I explained the subjunctive in Spanish, along with the types of verbs that are used in the present subjunctive. In case you don't remember, the construction subject-verb que, subject-verb, or a main clause que, subject-verb, is the typical phrase that you will see in the subjunctive. However, to activate the subjunctive, the first verb must come from weird, and these are the most common weird verbs which I've shown in the previous videos. Instead of using every verb, I'll be showing one useful sentence using a different pronoun and one verb from each category to demonstrate sentences in the present subjunctive. Let's take the following phrases. Yo quiero que, subject verb, tú esperas que, subject verb, ella desea que, recomendamos que, and ellos dudan que. These are the sentences that I'll utilize throughout the video. The first verbs in these cases all activate the present subjunctive and match their pronouns. The second part, however, is any form of the subjunctive consisting of any subject and any verb, but in this case, it's in the present. Just to let you know, when I'll be showing these sentences in context, I'll use the system of conjugation for every type of verb that I showed in the previous video without actually saying what type of verb I'm using to make practice more legit. In case you don't remember, you can always watch the previous video. And one last thing that I can add is that sometimes I'll be implementing other Spanish concepts in a few main clauses just to make practice more beneficial. Now, let's begin with the following phrases and work backwards. Take a look at this phrase. Yo quiero que tú estudies español. This phrase is already in Spanish, with tú estudies being the subject and the verb, and with estudiar being an AR verb that is conjugated for the tú pronoun in the present subjunctive. How would you say this phrase in English? Now here, we have two options. First, if you want to visually translate the sentence, then you can say, I want that you study Spanish. But it doesn't really make sense to say that, even though it technically works. On the other hand, the second option is more logical in English, but it doesn't work visually in Spanish. I want you to study Spanish, using a complete infinitive to study. While it doesn't matter which phrase you say, because both are correct, I'll focus on both of them because we'll sometimes have cases when the two sentences can be applied, making it logical and practical. How would you say this phrase? I want him to use it. Yo quiero que él lo use. And the other way to write this is I want that he uses it. How would you say one of these phrases? Yo quiero que ellos ganen el juego. How would you say this phrase? Tú esperas que yo compre el libro. This sentence visually makes sense both in English and Spanish. How would you say this phrase? Tú esperas que él coma su comida. How would you say this? Tú esperas que ellos lean algunos libros. Now, how do you say this phrase? Ella desea que tú lo compartas con ella. How would you say this phrase? Ella desea que escribamos más. Now, let's get a bit more complex. How do you say one of these phrases? Te recomendamos que tú conduzcas este coche. This phrase was a bit hard because we had to put a direct object pronoun in the beginning along with an irregular yo verb in the present subjunctive. How would you say one of these phrases? A él le recomendamos que él conduzca con seguridad. How do you say this phrase? Ellos dudan que él diga mucho. This sentence visually makes sense. How would you say this? Ellos dudan que tú les digas eso. How do you say this? Yo quiero que tú lo hagas. How would you say this? Yo quiero que ellos hagan algo de comida. How about this phrase? Tú esperas que tengamos lo que tú necesitas. What about this one? Tú esperas que él tenga algo más. How would you say this? Ella desea que tú vengas ahora mismo. What about this? Ella desea que vengamos mañana. How about this one? Ellos dudan que yo los vea. What about this? Ellos dudan que tú me veas. Now, let's get more complex. How do you say one of these phrases? Te recomendamos que tú practiques todos los días. And now, how would you say one of these? A él le recomendamos que él practique los fines de semana. How would you say one of these? Yo quiero que él juegue con sus amigos. How about this? Yo quiero que ellos jueguen solos. How about this one? Yo quiero que tú analices esta frase. What about this? Tú esperas que yo pueda hacerlo. In this case, if you wanted to, you could have put the direct object pronoun before the conjugated verb. What about this phrase? Tú esperas que ellos puedan estudiar en silencio. How about this phrase? Tú esperas que yo te entienda. And what about this one? Tú esperas que ellos entiendan lo que tú dices. For the final sentences, this is where I'll show some general main clauses that have a subject and a verb after. How would you say this phrase? Es necesario que estemos aquí. What about this phrase? Es importante que tú me lo des ahora. How about this one? Es bueno que ella sea feliz. What about this? Es malo que yo sepa lo que es. And the final example in this video is this one. Es triste que ellos vayan sin decir adiós. And here, this is where every concept of the present subjunctive comes to an end. Even though the phrases in this video were sort of one-dimensional and sometimes not that relevant, my goal was just to present the system of the present subjunctive. At the end of the day, it's up to you to make any sentence that you want using any subject and any verb, because this is how you're supposed to think whenever you learn new language concepts. Even though some sentences did not make sense, my goal was to give the idea of the present subjunctive, and from there, you could have said anything that you wanted. And it will be the same idea for the next tenses of the subjunctive. I could have extended the video by talking about the present subjunctive using different expressions, conjunctions, and adjective clauses, but I chose not to because it's an even trickier topic that will probably confuse you even more, so that's that. This has been examples in the present subjunctive. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I made your learning just a bit simpler.